Better wake up before it's all gone.
Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and I wanted to do is just a quick assessment about Trumpcare versus Obamacare. Now, bottom line is this. Trumpcare is not necessarily this perfect free market reform by any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't really address many of the things that need to be addressed in healthcare regarding supply and demand, okay? Things that are causing people, basically all the incentives for there to be a lack of competition, a lot of the protectionism within the healthcare industry, intellectual property rules, ability for different organizations to be able to negotiate, people that have consumers have different choices, not just in their healthcare insurance, but in their healthcare providers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot that isn't addressed. But if you take a look at the structure of the bill, really what it's trying to do, which is probably not necessarily the goal it should be having, but this is what it was trying to do, is trying to create something that has all the things that people like about Obamacare, but addressing a lot of the criticisms of Obamacare. So it kind of does address some of the problems with the execution of Obamacare in an attempt to maintain Obamacare, which is, again, not addressing the underlying problem. But there's something to be said for what it does do, just to explain what it does. Okay, so first thing, with Obamacare, the way it worked is that they said that all health insurance plans have to maintain a minimum level of coverage. So basically it has to cover X number of things, regardless of whether the person who has the plan wants those things covered or needs those things. So for example, my personal health insurance plan covers things like birth control, mammograms. Well, I don't know about mammograms, but it covers a lot of different things that I'll never need because I'm not a woman. But it covers them. The idea is that it makes it cost less for people who do need that in their plan. Okay? Same thing for things that are needed for older people, etc. So the idea is by basically making everybody pay for coverage of everything, then the people who do need it pay less. Although what happens is you end up increasing the cost a lot more on those who don't need all those things, aka me, who saw my health insurance premiums increase to about 25% of my take-home pay due to just all the different ins and outs of Obamacare. But the thing is that you need younger people like myself to be insured. Because in order to have things like guarantee issue, where you say health insurance companies are under a guaranteed issue, meaning they cannot turn people down because of a pre-existing condition. Now, in order to cover the extra cost of sick people, older people, etc., that are generally going to use more healthcare, you need more younger people who are going to use less healthcare to pay premiums. So the young people have to pay more because there's also all these different rules regarding how the premiums are calculated and its actuarial value. And its actuarial value is basically if you paid for all these services, how much is a health insurance company covering? Again, you don't necessarily need all these services, but the idea is that I think the way it is in Obamacare is that 60% of the actual value has to be covered by the insurance plan. Okay, so while I don't need all the different services that are covered under my plan, theoretically my health insurance plan covers 60% of those costs after my based on some sort of model. So that discourages people the younger people to pay, because they're the ones getting the least amount of subsidy and also having to pay the most for the little that they're getting now. The way Obamacare is structured is that all the subsidies are geared towards the people who, on a need basis. So basically, people who are either low income, older, are the people who generally get the most generous subsidies in Obamacare. The problem is younger people who need to pay more to make up for it. So what they do in Trumpcare is they have a refundable tax credit. But instead of having a refundable tax credit that's means tested, meaning the more you make, the less subsidy you get, it's just a fixed tax credit that does change as you get older. Okay? The benefit of that, okay, or at least the logic of it, is that if you're that young person, it's a refundable. And this is one of Rand Paul's big problems with it, that the idea is that if your credit is more than your tax bill to begin with, you'll actually get a check back from the government. But the idea is this: it incentivizes young people to get a plan. Because right now, if you don't, if you have guaranteed issue and you don't have the mandate, that means young people who are paying so much can be like, I'm just not going to go get healthcare. But if I know I might get a check after my tax credit for getting healthcare, then those young people, suddenly the economic calculation for that young person changes. So now so basically the subsidies are skewed in the other direction to incentivize the people you need to be in those risk pools to be in there. Because the idea is if you get more young people in those risk pools, then it's easier to maintain the premiums, affordable premiums for people who are older, sicker, etc. So it's kind of skews it, that makes sense. The idea is that you want to subsidize not the people who need it the most, but the people who are going to necessarily contribute the most, so you can make it more affordable for everyone. So that does actually kind of make sense. I disagree with the policy. Again, I disagree with refundable tax credits in principle, because you are getting somebody else's money when you get a refund on that. So from a principle standpoint, but from an economic standpoint, I see the logic. So again, in order to maintain guaranteed issue, they do two things. Because again, in Obamacare, in order to have guaranteed issue, the idea is you just tax people. So basically, you have to pay for these so if you're a young person, you have to pay for these really expensive health insurance plans, and that sucks for you. But on the bright side, at least you don't have to pay this penalty if you pay the high price. So you're screwed either way. So you either pay a whole lot for a lot of healthcare that you don't really need right now, because again, it's covering a lot more than you may need right now. You're paying a lot more than necessarily what you're going to use. And then two, if you don't buy it, you get punished. So you're basically punishing the people who are needed to make this work. In this case, they try to use more of a carrot. So the idea is, again, you get this tax credit that encourages you, because basically the way the tax credit works versus that actuarial value, again, that amount that's covered versus what you're actually probably going to get covered for, it actually works the other way around, where basically the subsidy is less beneficial to you as you get older. So it kind of hinders the people who need it the most. But the idea is that if you can get enough young people in the plan, maybe premiums will go down enough to make it affordable for those who need it the most. Now, the second aspect of guaranteed issue is that not only do you have the tax credit to buy the plan, but instead of punishing you with the tax, they do this sort of continuous coverage penalty. So instead of paying a penalty to the government when you file your taxes, insurance companies are allowed to basically hit you real hard. So you can get insurance whenever you want, which again brings that worry about adverse selection, where people only get health insurance when they need it. But if you decide to do that, the health insurance company is allowed to charge you. Basically, you have to pay all the back premium. So if I get it in November and I wasn't covered January through October, I got to pay all of that, what I would have paid during that whole time, plus 30%. So you got to pay a sort of a lofty fee to the insurance company, and the idea is to sort of make up for the return during that lost period of time. But in a sense that it really kind of addresses two things. One, it's not a tax because you're not paying the government. And then two, it's not necessarily a mandate. While it potentially functions as a mandate, because then technically it becomes very onerous to not be covered, and it becomes more lucrative to be covered. But technically it's not a mandate, because you could just choose to never buy health insurance and you will never be punished if you never buy health insurance. But it will get so expensive when you finally do, if you wait too long, that it might as well it becomes punishing enough that it becomes kind of a pseudo mandate. So basically they just find really interesting sort of policy ways to try to replicate what was already existing in Obamacare, instead of actually creating something different, something that really is truly a market process of letting individuals choose their own plan. Now, there are, again, some clawing back of some of the problems. So again, remember how I mentioned that Obamacare forced every plan to have to cover so much? Some of those things are removed, but not all of them. I think there are some efforts to try to make it more possible to buy health insurance across state lines. There are a couple other sort of minor things, but basically this is a real sort of, it's a real stretch of an inch towards a more market-based healthcare system. But I do see the logic, even though everyone's slamming it, I do see the logic of some of these provisions. I do think it's a bad bill. You're basically just creating a lighter version of Obamacare, which basically won't cover people enough for the left to be happy about it. It's still going to be onerous enough, especially in the short run. In the short run, it might make things worse, even though theoretically I can see how in the long run it might work, from a policy perspective. But it won't please anybody in the short run, and it'll make everyone really angry in the long run. So there's no political upside to this. There's better policies you can put into place that may be more difficult politically, but more worth the fight. Because you're going to expend the same amount of political capital the way it's looking like, because everyone on both sides is slamming this policy. So if you're going to put something forward that everyone's going to hate, but you think you can get passed quicker, it just doesn't seem worth the political capital. You might as well spend the same amount of political capital getting something that's a little bit more worthwhile. So that's essentially my thoughts on it. So I'll talk to you guys later.